So, welcome everyone to the opening of the Inside Outsider exhibition in association with Integrate Mental Health. And we have Natalie here, Natalie Kemp, who is the CEO and founder of Integrate Mental Health. And we have Helen, who is their Director of Operations. So, I'm going to just do a short introduction before we move on. I'll try and keep it short. Before we move on and hear from the presenters, one of whom isn't here, so hopefully they'll turn up, maybe just get stuck in traffic. So I'll give you a little bit of background. I'm Don, I'm also a trainee art psychotherapist, which is kind of separate to this exhibition. And I had been on a period of deferment for a year. I'm back just now. And through art psychotherapy, we have our professional body as the British Association of Art Therapists. So you'll probably hear me just say BAAT. So I'm referring to the British Association of Art Therapists. So with BAAT, we have lots of different special interest groups. I feel really weird up here because I can't move my head because I'm moving away from this. So it feels really unnatural. But yes, so we have lots of special interest groups for different areas, and one of these is for dual experience. So within the art therapy profession, what we mean by that is people who are art therapists or trainees who also have experience of using mental health services. So this group is, people can join it just if they have an interest. They don't have to have had experience of using mental health services, but we also have a wellbeing group who meet, and we all meet once a month, and you have to have had dual experience to come to the wellbeing group. With the dual experience group, I was asked to present last year on a theme to do with dual experience. And through my research for that, I came across the concept of systemic stigma. So lots of mental health professionals from various disciplines who also have mental health difficulties. And many people feel that they have been silenced because of this, for fears that potentially their fitness to practice will be questioned on those grounds that they have a mental health difficulty, or that their competency may be questioned, and many people have had really difficult experiences in their working role. Natalie and Mandy will speak more about systemic stigma. I wanted to say a little bit about societal stigma, because we do have a fantastic anti-stigma campaign in Scotland, See Me. However, there are some people who question whether these can add to the anti-stigma campaigns, because they kind of locate these difficulties in the other, as if some people are completely immune to experiencing these. So I was thinking, I wonder if there's something we could add to this. So at the end of my presentation, I came up with a question, what can, not just art therapists, but all mental health professionals who have lived experience of mental health difficulties, what could we do to maybe add something to anti-stigma campaigns? So for me, it's not just about systemic stigma, it's about stigma overall, and recognising that there is no end of us and that anyone can experience these difficulties. And I feel it's important for us with dual experience, or certainly for myself, to not separate ourselves off or split ourselves off from people who are non-professionals. So we're kind of doing this in solidarity as well with people who are non-professionals. And just on that note, actually, if anyone gets a chance, I would pop over and visit the Out of Sight, Out of Mind exhibition just now over at Summerhill. I think it's on for 2 or 3 weeks. And that's an exhibition with people who have lived experience. It's 10 years, I think that's been running. It's really good. Yeah, exhibition. I've not been this year yet, but I will go. Yes, so the idea for this exhibition basically was born from that, my research, and I put a post on social media and connected with Natalie and Helen, and I got in touch with the Scottish Mental Health Arts Association, with Rob there, who's not with us tonight, and yes, I just wanted to thank SMAF for having us as part of the calendar, and their theme this year is Revolution, so join us in that. And I also wanted to thank Thrive Arts for funding the event. We applied to their small arts fund, so thank you, Kat and Linda. Okay, so yeah, one more thanks is just to everyone who's shown their support, whether that be through written or video statements, or just in any way, and also to everyone who helped out in the team, everyone who volunteered. Sorry, and I should have also thanked BAAT Scotland, who have been very supportive from the beginning. I'm so sorry, Bridget. So yeah, we are very fortunate to have the chairperson of BAAT Scotland, Bridget Grant, here, who's going to offer a few words really from the professional body's perspective on dual experience. And then following that, we'll hear from Mandy. Unfortunately, Mandy couldn't come in person, but we did meet with her and she's recorded her presentation, so we're going to show that tonight. And then we are hoping that we will hear from Greg at Bromley. Greg is a newly qualified art psychotherapist, and he's also worked as a social worker for 20 years. And then we will finish off with wonderful Natalie Kemp, the CEO founder from Integrate Mental Health, which is a company who, in fact, I'll let Natalie explain that to you so that I can wrap up. When we're doing artwork, and this is just a suggestion, because I think there can be some difficult themes come up within this, especially when there may be lots of different opinions on dual experience or professionals with mental health difficulties. And I just wanted, I guess, you could see this like as a social justice activism event, but the way I would approach that is more through compassionate dialogue and curiosity. So even if someone has a difference of opinion, maybe just being curious about that and not necessarily defending their own, and just, I think if everyone, because I think maybe everyone could learn something even from differences of opinions, and just remembering that we're all human and we all hurt, we all have pain. So thanks everyone. So could I ask you to welcome Bridget Grant, please, the chair of BAAT Scotland.
Okay, well, hello everyone, and thank you, Don, for introducing me. I'm Bridget. My name's Bridget, and I'm the chair of BAAT Scotland. And I'm really pleased to be here today, and thank you, Don, for inviting me just to say a few words from BAAT Scotland, really, in support of this exhibition. So Don's already said this, but BAAT stands for the British Association of Art Therapists, and is the professional body for art psychotherapists in the UK. And BAAT Scotland is the Scottish branch of that. Okay. So I guess, yeah, any one of us may experience difficulties with our mental and or our emotional health. And of course, art psychotherapists are certainly no different. Many of us have come to the training or the profession for our own experiences and emotional and psychological distress, mental health issues, and our own personal traumas. And many of us find the need to use services, whether through the GP, third sector, or privately, to attend to our emotional and mental health needs during our careers as practitioners. That's an ongoing thing. And it is important and right that we do so. However, stigmatization and shame can create barriers to therapists acknowledging our own mental health needs and getting the support that we need. So in my own experience, many years ago, I was going through a particularly difficult time, and I guess the way I would put it is, it was as if past traumas were becoming alive in the present. And the counselling that I accessed through a local service at that time, it really helped. And it helped to hold me and stabilise me. And actually, I think it prevented what might have been otherwise a spiral into a kind of breakdown. And then later on, longer term, dance movement psychotherapy really helped me grow and develop and do what I needed to do. So whilst that was really good, however, when I look back on it, it would have been so much easier if I'd been able to be more open with colleagues about what I was going through. And perhaps if I had been able to do that, I could have been more open with myself as well. You know, when we can speak to other people, then we can kind of hear ourselves more easily too. It's funny because I'm sure my colleagues at the time, or many of them, they would have been compassionate and non-judgmental. And so some of that fear might have been my own stuff, absolutely. But I think that actually I'd internalized something really powerful from the outside about what it is to be a therapist and what being a therapist looks like. And somehow I'd kind of translated that into the idea of a good therapist and a bad therapist. And certainly my emotional and mental health and the way I was experiencing myself didn't fit into what my idea of a good therapist should be at that point, this idealized idea. So now I'm pleased to say that I'm able to value that experience that I had and to recognize how it has not only helped me grow and develop as a person, but also helped me as a practitioner and an art therapist. So it really has helped to deepen my practice as well. I mean, the two go side by side, I think. So as art psychotherapists, it's important that we cultivate authentic awareness of our whole authentic selves in order to work with the whole self of the client. We cannot work fully with clients if we're not able to be open to be fully ourselves in our own process, of course. And I think that the requirement to have personal therapy through the art psychotherapy training is part of this. But for many reasons, of course, this integration of ourselves is not always easy. And there may be many things which get in the way, not least because we're working with the unconscious. And I do believe that the process of self-awareness or individuation, or whatever you call it, actualization, integration, has its own time and its own process. However, if you think about it, what's going on inside is one thing, but if in the external environment, the culture and the external environment reflects something which might be shaming, or judgmental, well, that's surely going to impede our progress that we make inside too. So within the art psychotherapy profession, thank goodness, I think, there is growing understanding of dual experience. And Don mentioned the special interest group, the dual experience special interest group. And there is increasing research methods or methodology, such as co-production, where art therapy theory or research is co-produced by both the therapist and the service of the client user. And Neil Springham, who's an art therapist, talks about that in terms of the democratizing of art therapy. And also, I just saw, I want to share a really interesting paper published in the Journal of Art Therapy, and it was published in May. You may have seen it, some of you, by art therapists Marley Jewell and Catherine Camden Pratt. And their paper is on peer art therapy. And they write, peer art therapy is the framework used for practitioners who are trained and experienced in both art therapy and mental health peer work. Peer work is the practice of using our own lived experiences to support someone also living with similar experiences and being equals within our space. I think that's really important, isn't it? In our context, we specifically mean experiences of mental health issues. Okay, so whilst things might be improving and awareness is being raised within the art psychotherapy profession, no doubt, as often, there is much more work to do. And so I'd really like to thank particularly Don and the others, but Don for bringing, you know, attention to this issue and dual experience and art therapy in Scotland, bringing it, raising the profile within the profession, art therapy profession in Scotland. And I think that this exhibition is a really exciting step towards dissolving the shame and stigma which may arise in relation to dual experience. And I think that this has the potential to reduce the pressure that we feel inside ourselves to split off and hide parts of ourselves from others and from ourselves too. And in doing that and not doing that, we may live more authentic lives and become more fully present in our work. Okay, thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Mandy Leonard. Mandy is going to introduce herself fully within her presentation. Mandy, I'll just do a brief overview though. Mandy is an art psychotherapist and is the former lead of the Dual Experience Group. And she's also a lecturer in art psychotherapy training. The reason I came back up again, however, was in Mandy's presentation, she hadn't mentioned this and she wanted to acknowledge it. So that is the writing around dual experience by Molly Reinhardt, Emma Johnson and Kirsty Killick. And they wrote a chapter titled On Being a Practitioner and a Client in a book edited by James Randall called Surviving Clinical Psychology. And it was published in 2019.
So firstly, I must apologise for not being in here in person. However, thank you for inviting me here to speak and share my thoughts. It is a real privilege to talk to you this evening about dual experience and challenging stigma. So the first slide I wanted to share with you is just to look at what is dual experience. And my understanding is it's someone who has had experience of mental health services, but who is also trained professionally. And I found this quotation, which I thought explained it, and said, an individual whose personal experiences have left valuable lingering effects on them in the form of lessons learned that later serve constructive purposes, specifically attitudes and sensitivities and characteristics which help them to serve those they treat. And the images on the slides are of two people who are internationally acclaimed keynote speakers and who have used their dual experiences to challenge stigma and labelling within the mental health system. So Dr. Eleanor Longdon, who is top right, is a clinical psychologist who overcame a diagnosis of schizophrenia to earn a master's in psychology and demonstrated that the voices in her head were really a sane reaction to insane circumstances. Dr. Longdon is now the postdoctoral service user research manager at the UK National Health Service Psychosis Research Unit. Dr. Ahmed Hankia, who is bottom right, overcame a debilitating episode of psychological distress, which was triggered by displacement and war. And he is now a Doctor of Psychiatry for the National Health Service and a Senior Research Fellow for King's College London and Cambridge University. Both these people have suffered from psychological distress while studying, which left them incapacitated and receiving devastating labels. Yet here they are, both at the cutting edge of their professions and with the perspective of services that really, to be honest, cannot come from a book. Lucy Johnston, who wrote Users and Abusers of Psychiatry, said, in my view, the work of every professional, whatever their training, should be based on this principle, that however unusual, confusing, overwhelming, or frightening someone's thoughts, feelings, and behaviour are, there is a way of making sense of them. I myself was diagnosed with bipolar some 30 years ago. Motherhood, sleepless nights, postnatal depression, and lack of support found me in front of a psychiatrist. And this was later to be discovered as a severe reaction to trauma, which was happening in my life at the time. I had always suffered from anxiety due to adverse childhood experiences. And once given this disabling diagnosis, I started a debilitating journey through a cocktail of mind-blowing medication. However, through strength, resilience, psychoeducation, training, therapy, and sheer determination to forge a career path in which I can be considered an equal professional, things have progressed. A team of specialists reconsidered my diagnosis and the label was wiped from my records. I've recovered to the point where I'm once again a useful member of society and able to give to others. And I now take no medication for anything, which is absolutely my choice. Medication absolutely has its place in helping people, but this is what works for me. However, I don't consider this as some sort of miraculous cure. I believe that I am someone with living experience. I can still suffer from bouts of anxiety and low mood and hold my mental well-being in the forefront of all that I do. But then I do question right now, who does not have to hold on to their own mental wellness within the often difficult environments in which we work? Also considering the current political, environmental and post-COVID climate, and just the sheer trauma of life's many challenges and adversities, do we not all have to be aware and protective of our mental health? So wandering back to the beginning for a moment, I was asked to share my story of bipolar at an NHS conference many years ago, right at the start of my journey. And I was sharing a platform alongside a mental health nurse who had worked some 30 years in services. And she turned to me at the side of the stage while we were preparing to go on, and in all sincerity said to me, "You know, Mandy, you really shouldn't wear that striped cardigan with that flowery top because people will think you're having a bipolar manic episode. You really need to dress more sedately if you wish people to take you seriously." And in that moment, my decades of work history, which was mainly customer facing, went out of the window. I was considered purely as someone who used services and therefore didn't know how to present myself. And this was one of many incidents which made me realise that stigma was still loud and proud. And this is when I asked myself, what could I do to affect change? And I realised that I needed to get a professional qualification within the health sector, which would allow me to stand as an equal, to understand theory and research, and to be able to have a conversation around these important topics from an informed position. I realised that I needed to hold the hope for myself and for others that recovery is possible. This then pointed me in the direction of joining my art degree knowledge in mental health and business skills and training as an art therapist seemed to pull all of these talents together to help me to fulfill that brief. So as an art therapist, I'm registered with the HCPC, the Health and Care Professionals Council, and this body protects the public and keeps a register of professionals who meet HCP standards for training, skills, behaviour and health. There are over 318,000 people registered with HCPC, and they would all have to adhere to a set of standards. The standards for art therapy, there are 5,000 odd registrants, are as follows. So our standards of proficiency is that we must manage the emotional burden that comes with working in a pressured environment. We must look after our health and well-being, seeking appropriate support where necessary. We must identify anxiety and stress and recognise the potential impact on our practice. We must understand the importance of our own mental and physical health and well-being strategies to maintain fitness to practice. We must act as a role model for others. And we must understand the value of therapy and developing insight and self-awareness through our own personal experience. So my question is therefore, how can we fulfill our obligation to this professional registration if we are met with stigma and judgment within our working environment? As Jason, a trainee clinical psychologist, states, if I contribute to a discussion as a professional, I silence my voice as a service user and risk betraying my values in politics. If I share my lived experience, my professionalism is compromised. The implication that we must be either, not both, is pervasive, unaddressed, and exhausting. So what I feel is needed is an open conversation where people can identify as dual experience, and this is seen as a strength, not a hindrance. So personal therapy is mandatory in most psychotherapy and counselling trainings, and most people who I speak to who identify as having dual experience really value this facility. Personal therapy and supervision is key to monitoring our own well-being. And we don't consider it necessarily a tick box exercise to perhaps get a qualification. It is a way for us to function at an optimal level and to ensure that we are holding the client's best interest at the heart of all that we do. And a psychotherapist said, thinking about how you are, how you respond, how you behave in tiny ways, being very aware of that relational stuff is really important. I don't think I would appreciate that in quite the same way had I not had that experience of sitting as the client in the chair myself. So the importance of self-reflection may not need to be as key an issue for professionals who've maybe not used services and sat in that client's chair. So perhaps being a professional with dual experience could be seen as a particular strength, our superpower, as stated in the paper by Miller, Hubble and Duncan. Super shrinks is that the most effective therapists sought systematic, regular feedback from the clients and implemented it into their own practice and followed their own process. This is something we as dual experience therapists do naturally. We've been on the receiving end of both great interventions which encourage hope and also the blank faces and hierarchical type of interventions which can come from now outdated modes of them and us approach by those who may assume an air of superiority. We know that by offering to walk alongside our clients, to treat them as equals, as human beings, to appropriately and considerately share our own humanness and lack of perfection, that we can do so much good within our therapeutic alliance and hold ourselves as beacons of hope for others. Trauma can happen to anyone at any time, as a service user or as the professional treating others. Trauma can leave people in different places. We are all human, and therefore hiding who we are, pretending to be perfect and dealing with the stigma that comes with admitting to having a difficult time helps no one. So today, this is where I stand. I'm a health and care professional, registered art therapist. I'm a university lecturer. I stood down as director of British Association of Art Therapy this year, was the lead for the dual experience special interest group. I have prior lived experience practitioner and trainer for an NHS trust and a cross-sector background in business, hospitality, education and mental health. And I've worked with children in adult and child mental health, with adoption, with brain injury, with domestic violence and with substance abuse and rehabilitation. I wouldn't be in this place had I not had the experiences that I've had. This is what's led me to be here and to be able to be of some use now. So I don't look back on my experience as negative, but as actually something that is a superpower that's being able to allow me to relate to people in a very different way. So I hope that more opportunities like this exhibition and the work of Integrate Mental Health will help to pave the way to standardise the fact that professionals and practitioners are also just human beings with our own experience of distress. And I leave you with this quote by Clinton, which mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, but stigma and bias shame us all. So thank you.
So we were hoping to hear from Greg. That's a bit too high for me. Hear from Greg next, and unfortunately, Greg's not here with us. So I'm wondering if we could just move on to yourself, Natalie, and then following Natalie, we'll have a Q&A, and then we can view the artwork and have food and drink. Yeah. Okay. So Natalie, as I said before, is the CEO, founder of Integrate Mental Health. I will let Natalie tell you more about what Integrate do. Thank you, Natalie.
Hello. Okay, it works. Can I just say, this is wonderful. It's not very often that we are standing amongst people who are saying similar things to us, because we grew out of isolation. And it's really quite moving today, because connection is everything. It really is. So even to have you here listening, and the incredible power of the energy of the works that are hung behind us, well, it's very brave. And it speaks to something changing, which is very important, because things need to change. And things need to change because there's a lot of stigma around if you're a provider of mental health services and you have your own mental health difficulties. So I identify like that. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I had a rather spectacular breakdown in 2015. I'm laughing, you know, and some people are like, why do you laugh? Are you smiling about that? And it's because there's nothing about that I would change for the world. There's a lot that happened before then, so some of my difficulties were quite early. And I started accessing various different types of counselling from probably about the age of 18, and kind of honed in more and more into the thing. And then the thing became clear. And then I started long-term intentional psychoanalytic psychotherapy in 2007, before I started training as a clinical psychologist. And I was in it for 15 years. And so the breakdown through happened in the cradle of analysis, if you like. But I couldn't talk to her very much when it was going on, because I was pretty much laid out. I was in recovery for probably around 1 or 2 years. And it was out of a complete fragmentation that I fell, and I found the ground, and I stayed on there for a while. And then I learnt to walk again with the help of my little doggy. And from there, I slowly got myself back into some work. I kind of did my own care plan. Did some admin for Office Angels for a while. Loved losing myself in a little bit of a spreadsheet or a Word document. But I wasn't done yet. I didn't give a shit about the mental health professions, and I wasn't very happy at all with clinical psychology profession. It's all a load of fuckery, really, because they weren't seeing the whole picture. But I was, because I was attuned then to something that wasn't being seen. Seen, made up a new word. I like new words, because the old ones don't really work too often. So we make them up, don't we, Helen? We integrate, we make up a little words. Move out of the psyches into something much more human. And peer work. We've got it on the back of our T-shirts. We're really just peer workers, aren't we? So, from the ashes comes the phoenix, and the rising of the energy through the chaos that is required and necessary in order to shape something else for a bit, and then chaos ensues again, you know, it just will, because that's what life is really, underneath all the structures that we like to put on it to make ourselves feel safe enough, and some of those are fine. We need them, otherwise we'd just all be a bit bonkers, a bit too much for too long. Integrate mental health occurred, kind of a labour on the couch, and the birth happened. And it was really about me coming back into the scene over Twitter, saying, is there anybody else out there like me? And I really didn't care what people thought about me. I was ready to jack in my registration and all things. That done nothing for me, really. And people came, and then the list happened, and there were 300, and then a forum happened, and then there was a website that looked like a little patchwork quilt, because I didn't know how to code for toffee. And every time somebody joined, I cried. And what I do know from my own lived experience is how important home is, because sometimes I haven't had one. And so belonging was very important. So important. And so they came, and they joined, and it was wonderful. And lots of people had been on the edge and on the outside and cast out and away because nobody wanted to listen, thought they were broken, and thought they had nothing to offer. And some people were under the auspices of HCPC and were being questioned about whether they're even fucking competent anymore. It's outrageous. They didn't just lose their skills overnight. They just lost some capacity. Capacity, that's the word. And so we do work with the HCPC, and they know about us. What is revolution? I like etymology, so I looked it up. And in the 13th century, it was about the celestial bodies moving around the earth, which I thought was just nice. I like the stars. And then in the 15th century, it became something slightly different. I'm going to look it up here because I wrote it down. Getting older, so this gets longer. It's an instance of great change in affairs. An instance suggests a thing that occurs suddenly. And sometimes in us, it could be one. Sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes an instance can feel a little bit longer, elasticized and moving, and I feel like we're in something here. And it takes action, revolution, the original meaning of activist, direct action. Everybody here is an activist. Why? Because it's not yet fully accepted by the system that there is not only support needed, because that's only half of it, we need to complete the circle, the valuing of that experiential knowledge. What you come back with is the gold. So when systems around us that we work with, various trust organisations, say, we don't know what to do, it's like, what do you mean? You've got the people right there. They're in your lived experience networks. They're the people you're supposed to be co-producing with, and that's co-production on the inside, not just on the outside, with our allies. Anyone who's used mental health services. You've got the value of the knowledge right there. They've snagged your system. They've been through occupational health. They know about HR. They've had conversations with management, the whole spectrum of which might be good, bad and ugly, who knows. Fair few of all of that. And they know how to make things better. And so, yeah, you can use your kind of top-down knowledge, and you can do your thing, and you can be more switched on since COVID put a spotlight on staff well-being. But this has been around for a really long time. people who provide mental health services have always had mental health problems. They are now, and they will do in the future, because mental health problems aren't just about burnout at work, because that's not a mental health problem, that's an organisational syndrome. And the intervention, therefore, is with the organisation, not the person, although the person could do with a bit of a hand, probably emotionally exhausted. And so the people are right there, and they're not asking them. They're scrabbling for something else because experiential knowledge is not valued. It doesn't have the power, you know, as much as our gold standard RCT double-blind X, Y's and Z's. What's the evidence, Natalie? What are you going to bring if you help our trust? What are the matrix and the metrics and the outcomes and the scales, and how do we know if we're going to achieve culture change? Oh, God. Okay. Did you speak to your network of people and ask them? Oh. Is there a link with the board? Is there an actual link, like a feedback link? Is there a thing going on? Oh. And then they come back and we go, an exec left. And we've got a new one on the board and it's kind of working. Like, my God. Anyway, we work with systems. But the peers are right in the middle of it. They are the power and the fuel and the energy and the voices that need raising against all of this stigma that happens. So this instance of revolution feels like it also needs something else, because then what when all the activists are exhausted and passing the baton between them? And my feeling today was something about evolution, revolution to evolution. And so I looked that one up and I found something really surprising over and above growth and development, which links beautifully to the integration that we were talking about earlier, that sense of we know how hard it is to surmount certain protections we have in ourselves to move towards an integration of our experiences in order to operate from a wholer sense of being and self. Imagine what the system, which is an animal that has its own protections and ways it likes to expulse threat and vulnerability so it can feel a little bit better about itself, so it puts it out there and other things. But it wants to bring it together and it's finding it hard. So developmentally, if we look at that through a lens of you just haven't had a chance to do it yet and have sensible, reasonable conversations, then we can work with that. But the evolution, it's an interesting one. It's not just growth. It is this is 16th century, the unrolling of what was wrapped up. I thought, come on, etymology dictionary, you've just given me the absolute perfect thing for my talk. What's been wrapped up is everybody's pain, everybody's difficulties, everybody's not being able to say things, so you hide it. Well, it's not hidden anymore, and it ain't gonna be really anymore. Fuck that. So we want the unrolling of things, but of course we need spaces to unroll into. And so it's not just about us being brave, because really we shouldn't have to be. Bravery should not be required. It is about how the system and the scene around us create space for us to unroll into, and that has a sustainability over time, which is why we work systemically. Because we need to meet our peers in the mentorings that we do and say, hey, you're not alone. And they're like, fuck, I can see all these faces on the screen, because it's often quite virtual because everybody's everywhere, you know, geographically. That's amazing, like to be together. Even that, it's not what we even have a talk about. Really nice to meet you. But it's not just about that, it's about all our stakeholders, all the training institutions, all the organisations, the trusts, the regulators, the professional bodies. We worked really hard with them to lobby them for a statement from the Division of Clinical Psychology to say it's okay to be a clinical psychologist with lived experience of mental health difficulties. They were kind of like, they didn't say it out loud, but kind of like, why do we need to make a statement about this? I'm like, because you fucking do. because nobody's going to look at the back of a job description that somehow, somewhere says, if you have lived experience, we'll value that, even if they do value that. You need to do it as a beacon, because people are going to have a look at that and say, do I belong here? Really, do I even fit? Without turning myself in some kind of crazy shape, you know. So, revolution, evolution, people being here, talking the same language, the incredible power of the works that are here this evening. I just want to say thank you to you all, because we are people who have felt very isolated. And I feel like there's some hope for connection. So, in gratitude.
So, thanks, I was just internet from Ted and Greg, thank you so much. We're not going to have Greg with us tonight, unfortunately. Hopefully Greg will potentially do a recorded one, and we'll share it when we have recorded it tonight next week. And I'll share that online, and that will be on the Greg YouTube channel.
Hi, I'm Greg Bromley, and I'm a self-taught artist. I'm a former social worker over 20 years, a recently qualified art psychotherapist, and currently I'm a resurrected social worker with an outside hustle known as the cosmic wormhole. I'm also pretty clueless when it comes to using Teams to record my speech that I failed to give last week. So I've just spent the last 2 hours trying to upload slides that you can actually find on Integrate Mental Health's website. So I apologise for the lack of images, but for those who attended the opening or the exhibition thereafter, I hope you know I am. Some images behind me, they're pretty representative of what I do. So I started to paint after the death of my dad and during an incredibly stressful time working as a social work team manager, sort of circa 2012. And for years, I've really struggled with the inescapable lingering stress of work impacting on me outside of the workplace. I guess the colleagues at the time might have been perceived as functional but stressed, but then I guess we all were. But when I reflect on that time and the subsequent years, it was as though coping at work left me no headspace to get to grips with myself personally. I experienced anxiety and depressive symptoms and was treated accordingly by various GPs. I guess my personality and northern working class get on with it conditioning made my experience worse. I became really strung out as I couldn't really express what was going on with me. I made poor personal decisions and life choices. I looked for solace in all the wrong places and slipped further down that vortex of despair, or as I see it now, my own cosmic wormhole. So during all this time and to this day, I painted. At times making art felt like another vice, another way to escape my depressed and stressed self. I would disappear into the creation of my images, challenging myself to greater relative virtuosity with each image. Art making felt like the one thing in my life that I had total control over, obviously within the parameters of my self-taught skill set. I realised over the years that the paintings contained much more complex information about me than I had originally considered. I started observing each image having multiple narratives, recycled themes and motifs, all of which seemed to create a pattern of obscure coded notes to self. After some catastrophic personal years, just before and during the COVID pandemic, I found myself drawn to retraining to be an art psychotherapist. It seemed to be the perfect career change, fusing my experience as a social worker with my passion for art making and dawning awareness of art as a mirror to the artist. One of the other interesting aspects of the art psychotherapy training was the requisite of you having personal therapy during the course period. I have continued with mine, and it was much needed and well overdue. So most of my art plays out on several levels, and although all my figures manifest as shape-shifting beasts, they are very much my take on the human condition. I never have a preconceived notion of a final piece. My characters emerge intuitively. I just have some rules and parameters as to the construction of an image. My actual process is a secret recipe that has emerged from years of dead-end learnings. Although they're not, I guess they're not actually dead ends, but at the time they felt like dead ends. But with each new painting, I would go on to use those dead ends as a, I don't know, as a steer in a different direction, perhaps. My work is heavily influenced by my psychic state and consumption of other media. Music is extremely important to my creative process, as is my heavy consumption and limited understanding of quantum physics and cosmology. I'm fascinated by the underlying nature of reality being at odds with our day-to-day experiences as humans. I guess this duality is like presenting as the functioning practitioner, whilst all your own mess is going on behind the mask. Due to my experiences of personal therapy and art psychotherapy training, I've come to realise that my work reflects my experience of vicarious trauma as a social worker. I often look at my characters and wonder whether the distressed, aggressive, impossible nature of them is somehow a sublimation of the thousands of troubled and humbling narratives I have absorbed during my career. I'm pretty sure that my characters are trauma vehicles. Take all the constituent parts of my experience and intuitively filter them through my creative lens. The resulting mental soup is poured onto the canvas as imagination. My atoms get together and create something new for the universe. And I really like this idea of considering myself as a collection of creative atoms. So the 5 paintings that you can't actually see in this video, but are on the Integrate Mental Health website and were at Drill Hall in Edinburgh, are 5 of my most recent images. I found myself diving further into quantum and cosmological motifs as I immersed myself in reflecting on the underlying nature of reality. I embrace the notion of our human experience being the lens for the universe to understand itself. We humans are the only known collection of atoms that are conscious of their own demise. We see time as fleeting before our atoms disassemble. We are literally the anxious mind of the universe. I like this idea, and I try to reflect this in my recent images with cosmic and quantum symbols and wave-like backgrounds, wave function-like backgrounds. I seem to paint portraits of shapeshifters at odds with each other, or with themselves in the hidden reality. I'm sure the images represent my internal struggles, the concept of duality, but also the search for answers. The images are infused with my experiences of social work and trauma, set amongst the hidden reality of quantum physics. I also like to think that most of the images contain a streak of humour. Humour is and always will be one of my survival tools, or a defence mechanism. I like to think of it as a survival tool. To conclude, art making came to me during a period of crisis. It was both escape and catharsis. It is somewhere to hide for a time and learn from the final artifact. My art has helped me understand myself and others close to me in a way that words and memory would not allow me to. It's helped me slightly better myself through self-reflection, and whilst I am able, I will always create. I now understand the needs of the creative mind, my creative mind. My atoms won't allow me to stop. Apparently, they want me to make as many artifacts as I possibly can, whether I like it or not. And finally, I must mention and thank my brilliant wife, Ellie, and wonderful Dashun Ziggy. My wife's mostly unconditional constant love is legendary. She's provided me with a wonderful foundation to make art, though perception of my images remains somewhat perplexed. Thank you.